Anybody in? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. My beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, to our viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, this is another evening, another session in looking at minarets and thrones. And that is the relationship of scholars to the rulers. And this we understood to be one of the most important interactions in the Muslim world today. It has always been one of the most important interactions because the scholars represent like the head on the body, in a sense, and the heart in the body, the key mover and shaker. And without direction, without the direction of the leadership, those who are in charge, whether they are in charge because of their physical might, in the case of the Umara, or the case of the rulers, or whether they're in charge because of their knowledge of the revelation. And since Islam is based upon al-wahi, it's based upon the revelation, the role of the ulama, those who are close to the revelation, and that being what came through the Book of Allah, Al-Quran, final revelation to humanity, and through the authenticated sayings and sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Those who are familiar with that have the essence of Islamic lifestyle. So the essence of our aqidah, the essence of our politics, economics, social life, family life, comes from the revelation. And that is critical for us in understanding the importance of the scholars, because the leader is one who has power. And every society there is somebody, some group that has sulta, that has authority, that has the force, and is controlling the resources of the society, and basically dominates the people. In an Islamic society, there are those with physical authority, but there are also those with knowledge-based authority and spiritual authority. So this is a study of how these two groups interacted, and the result of their interaction spelt either a positive direction for the Muslim Ummah or a negative one. And we have been looking at the highest form of this relationship, and that is what we call fusion. It is the fusion of the ability to lead and the actual power and the knowledge. So that if the person who's the leader is also a highly knowledgeable person, like a mujtahid, one who can make religious decisions, and he has the power, then we have the type of leadership we want, and along with his consultation, and along with the involvement of the general community, then we have movement in an Islamic society. And we found out that the best examples of this fusion came with the four Khalifas, the Khulafa al-Rashidin. And they represented the highest pinnacle of people who were profoundly knowledgeable in Islam and had natural ability to lead. And so we looked at Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anh, Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anh, Uthman ibn Affan, radiallahu anh, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh, wa karramallahu wajhah. That was the fusion. That was the highest level. And this is what we call the period of the rightly guided caliphs. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the Khilafat after me in my ummah will last for 30 years, 30 amen, 30 years. Then there will be a kingdom after that. And so the Khilafat represented that highest level of this fusion, these natural succession after the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And that period, 30 years, again, we found out that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anh, for those who weren't here, he ruled for approximately 2 years, 3 months, and 10 days. And Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anh, he ruled for 10 years, 6 months, and 8 days. Uthman, radiallahu anh, who many people do not recognize the importance of Uthman and his leadership abilities and his accomplishment, he ruled for 11 years, and 11 months, and 9 days. And Ali, radiallahu anh, he ruled for 4 years, 9 months, and 7 days. And we found out that the leadership was passed on to Al-Hassan, the son of Ali, not because of a kingdom, but because of the choice of the believers. And so his rule is generally attached by the scholars to the Khulafa al-Rashidin, and that was 6 or 7 months. And if you add these together, then they basically come to 30 years almost to the day. And that is part of the miracles, mu'jizat, of the Prophet ﷺ being able to predict the rule of the Khilafat in his ummah. But the shaitan, wal-iyadhu billah, rose to the occasion. And he, wherever he possibly could, he obscured things, he deceived, he embellished, he divided, he fabricated. He did those wicked things to divide human beings. And we understand that Islam is not the religion of malaika. It is not the religion of angels, but it is the religion of human beings. And human beings are subject to mistakes. That is the beauty of this revelation, because it's not something that is far away and cannot be benefited from, but it is something that is real. It is something that's dealing with our lives. And so the talbis iblis, the deception of the shaitan, occurred. And one of the biggest forms of this deception came through the innovations, the bid'ah of Abdullah ibn Saba. And he was from the Yahud of Yemen. He entered into Islam in order to destroy it. And he especially focused on, in terms of causing confusion with the guidance of shaitan, he entered into a type of bid'ah through Tawheed and Risala. So it's a type of innovation in the concept of one God and also in the messengership. So he started spreading out ideas that there are people who actually have some of the power of Allah, that Allah does things through people. And this is not a strange concept, because Isa alayhi salam, what happened to Jesus, peace be upon him, is that the Christians actually developed the Trinity, where they saw the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and that the Father actually came into the Son or created the Son. And so it wasn't just the Father, it was a partnership. And so that concept of the Creator not being the sole authority, but sharing authority with created things, it was something that had caused confusion in many of the religious systems throughout the world. So Ibn Saba took advantage of this, and the advantage of the weakness of people who need to see God. They need to see things. And so it's easier for a person, in a sense, a narrow-minded person who's not that spiritual, to believe in something he can see. People believed in the sun, they believed in the moon, they believed in rivers, they believe in trees. So many different objects in the universe have been believed in by human beings. And so Ibn Saba, he tried in Medina, and he focused on Ali, because people had this concept of the royal family, that Ali was like a son, and he should take over, and his children should take over. So he focused on Ali, that there was something special about Ali, that Allah was in him. And that was rejected in Medina, rejected in Mecca, rejected in Basra. In Kufa, which has always been a hotbed of the occult and magic and confusion, people started to follow this, but when they went to Egypt, that is when they got solid followers. And this fitna, this confusion, entered into Arabia again in the form of Hujjaj, who were going to make their pilgrimage, but yet their intention was to destroy the Khilafat and even to kill the Khalifa himself, wa iyadhu billah. Word came to the Sahaba, and they were ready to deal with this group outside of Medina. They were ready. But Uthman, being a very pious person and wanting to protect the sanctity of the city, said, no, not on my watch, no violence inside of Medina. And unfortunately, these seditionists succeeded in climbing over the roof of Uthman's house and stabbing him while he was reading the Quran, wal iyadhu billah, to the verses in Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah is saying, but Allah will suffice you against them, and He is all-hearing and all-knowing. And that was a very heavy blow to the Muslim world. And his wife, Naila, who was there on the occasion, she tried to defend him, and she lost her finger. And when the word got out that these seditionists, some of them escaped, some were killed, but when the word started to spread, and Naila sent Uthman's bloody shirt and her finger to Syria. Now, why did she choose Syria? This was the base of the Umayyad clan. And you remember the struggle between the Hashemites and the Umayyads in Mecca, two power forces before Islam. Islam changed that. They united, but still people have their tribal affiliations. And so Abu Sufyan's people, his son Muawiyah, they chose Damascus and Syria to be their base. And when they got very emotional, and when they heard about this, they wanted revenge. Ali radiallahu anh, being who he was, being the wisest and the one who's perfect for making decisions, he called the selection committee together. These are the people who were left of the 10 people promised paradise, and they chose him as the Khalifa. It was ratified by the people, but there was a disagreement. So the confusion was between Muawiyah's position of revenge and Ali's position of stability, political stability. And of course, the ulama, overwhelmingly throughout history, have shown clearly that Ali was correct, and his side was the righteous side. But in any event, it turned out to be a major confrontation, and Ali met Muawiyah eventually. It's a long story, But eventually they met at a place called Siffin in Syria, Iraq, and neither side could really win the fight. It looked like it was going toward Ali's side. And so Muawiyah's side raised the Quran, and they said, let the Quran decide. So they decided, they ended the fighting, because nobody really wanted to fight. They ended the fighting, and they had an arbitration, and they called to this arbitration Amr ibn al-As to represent Muawiyah, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, radiallahu anhuma, to represent Ali. But the negotiations couldn't really come to a conclusion, and they eventually broke down. Ali left toward Kufa to go back to Iraq, but a large group of his people broke away, about 12,000 of them. And this is the group that we found out was the one called the Khawarij. They lost their minds, and they pledged to assassinate the Khalifa. And they sent out assassins to kill Umar, to kill Muawiyah and Ali, and they only succeeded in stabbing Ali radiallahu anh and poisoning him. And as he was passing away, they said, your son Al-Hassan. And he said, no, I don't say yes, I don't say no. He was chosen by popular consent. And so he was the Khalifa, but Muawiyah was still there. And he ruled for a short period of time, and with the possibility of war happening again, he abdicated his rule and he gave it to Muawiyah. So this is accepted by the ulama as a valid way that the rule could be given over. And it was accepted by the overwhelming majority of the scholars and the community. And so that was called Am al-Jama'ah because things calmed down. Things actually calmed down. And Al-Hussein, the brother of Al-Hassan, he had certain conditions, but he accepted it. He basically accepted the rule. And it appeared that the fitna was over, but the mistake that Muawiyah made was that he chose his son Yazid as a type of crown prince. This is a major mistake. And Al-Hassan, they believe he was poisoned to death, and Allah knows best. And so, as Muawiyah was dying, Yazid was taking over. The majority of the companions said, okay, let's accept this because we don't want another great fitna to happen, but many said no. Of them, the most two prominent was Abdullah ibn Zubayr, radiallahu anhu, who went to Mecca. And he formed his own rule, his own khilafat in a sense, and ruled for a long period of time. And Al-Hussein. And the sad story of Al-Hussein, who was supposed to be supported by the people of Kufa, and when he was on his way there to struggle against Yazid, the people of Kufa changed their mind. They became fickle and afraid, and they left Al-Hussein, and he was killed with his family at a place called Karbala. Okay, so this was a great tragedy for the Muslim world. And the rule of the Umayyads continued. And so that rule of the Umayyads, that one, and this is a list of the Khalifas of the Umayyad dynasty. Okay, so it begins with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, right? And then Yazid, this is the mulk, remember, this is the kingdom that the Prophet ﷺ said was going to happen. And then it goes to Muawiyah the second, right, the son of Yazid. And then Marwan ibn al-Hakim takes over. Now, he's not directly connected to Muawiyah, but he is one of the Umayyads, right? So he's like an uncle, you know, in a sense. So he takes over. So it's still Umayyad rule. So there's Marwan ibn al-Hakam, there's Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, there's Al-Walid, Sulaiman, Umar ibn AbdulAziz, Yazid the second, Hisham al-Walid the second, Yazid the third, Ibrahim ibn al-Walid, and then Marwan the second. Okay, so this is a dynasty. It's called the Umayyad dynasty. And it's not all bad. We realize it is a kingdom. But in a sense, it is a kingdom. It's an Islamic kingdom. Okay, it's not a khilafat, because the khilafat is when the rule is based directly upon revelation, and it's not a family. Okay, but you can have a kingdom, you can have a family who rules according to the book of Allah. That's possible, if they are really ruling according to the book, and if the people accept them. So if you have those two elements, then it's possible. And so when we look at the Umayyads, everything is not bad. For instance, the fifth Khalifa, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, from his achievements was that he helped to clean up and to reconstruct Jerusalem. And he was the one who actually built the structure that you know now as Masjid al-Aqsa. Okay, so that structure there was a wall, but there was not much really inside. And so he built the foundation for what we see now as Masjid al-Aqsa, right? And then the Dome of the Rock, right, is built by Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. So this is a great achievement. The Dome of the Rock is still there up until today. It's one of the most iconic places in the Muslim world. And so, but the problem was the Umayyads, their rule was basically like what came in hadith to be the jabr. It's like force. It's based upon authoritarian rule. And it's based on wealth, accumulation, and favoritism. So there's a ruling class, they're in charge. So politically, it was a kingdom. Now, this is not to say that it was a terrible time to live, because to a great extent, with the spread of Islam was spreading, people were praying, they were dying with shahada, fasting in Ramadan, memorizing the Quran, making hajj, paying zakat. So in some ways it was good, but politically there was turmoil and there was some corruption. So this is what happens when you have a kingdom, because with the kingdom is the greed. It's the physical greed of the people who want to be the kings. So this leads us up to one of the great leaders in Islamic history, and that is the Khalifa Umar ibn AbdulAziz, rahimahullah. And he was the 8th Umayyad Caliph. He was number 8. Okay? And he is known for his piety, his integrity. He was really into justice. He ruled for a short period of time, but in that time, the changes that he made was so great that sometimes they even say he's the 5th rightly guided caliph. Okay, he's the 5th. But somebody even say 6 if you want to include Al-Hassan. But you'll hear the 5th rightly guided caliph. That's how much people respected the rule of Umar ibn AbdulAziz. And his background was that, he was from the family of the Umayyads. Okay, his father was AbdulAziz ibn Marwan. Remember Marwan ibn Hakim. Okay, and his father was the governor of Egypt, but his mother, Asim, Layla bint Asim, she was the granddaughter of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu. So she was Umar's granddaughter. Okay, so within that lineage is something else. And this may be partly affecting the thinking of Umar ibn AbdulAziz, Allah knows best. But he had that connection with Umar, of course, who was the great Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so Umar ibn AbdulAziz, he grew up in Medina. And he studied in the Prophet's mosque. And of course, the greatest scholars in the Muslim world were located there in Medina and in Mecca, also in Basra and Kufa in Iraq and in Damascus. Right? These are some of the key places. Cairo to a certain extent, but really Mecca and Medina, and Iraq probably had the greatest scholars. Damascus also was high up there. But Umar studied in Medina. And so a number of great scholars were there, and he was the student of these great scholars. The one who influenced him the most, and this is the key person we're looking at tonight, and that is Imam az-Zuhri. Okay, so he was a leading hadith scholar, one of the greatest hadith scholars in Islamic history. Okay, he had high intelligence, deep understanding of fiqh. Okay, he was a pious person from when he was very young. Okay, so, and he was one of the main teacher of Umar ibn AbdulAziz as he was coming into his maturity. Umar was then appointed to be the governor of Medina by his cousin al-Walid. This is when Walid took over. So Umar became the governor of the city of Medina, and he started to change things. So now here you have a person coming into power, and the Umayyad rule is one of power, greed, wealth accumulation, like class type of thing. He starts changing things around. He starts distributing the wealth. He starts taking away unfair taxes. And that's a big thing for people even today. The taxes, what even in Canada, that's what we're talking about, is the taxes. Okay? People who were owed property, things taken away from them, he gave it back. No matter who had taken it. That wouldn't necessarily happen under the other Umayyads, because they had heavy favoritism. Okay? And he started to make everybody accountable. All of the leaders, everyone in authority, everyone in position was accountable. Why is this? How does this ruler, who comes out of the Umayyad dynasty, that is one based upon power and authority and accumulating wealth, why does he divert? Why does he go back to the prophetic way? The key is the scholar. Now remember, rulers and scholars. So if you don't have fusion, you need to have a ruler who is complemented by a scholar or scholars. You see? So in this case, it was Imam Muhammad ibn Shihab az-Zuhri. Okay? So he is a great scholar from the Banu Zuhra tribe. And from a young age, he was heavy into Islamic knowledge. And he was in Medina. And so from his teachers, this was the home of the Sahaba. This is the home of the Tabi'een. So prominent scholars amongst the Tabi'een were his teachers, like Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, Urwa ibn al-Zubair, Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah. So these are some of the greatest Islamic scholars at the time. So these were the teachers of Imam az-Zuhri. Okay, so he's got this chain of knowledge going directly back to the Prophet ﷺ. And it's this chain, remember, this chain going back, this is what Imam Malik used. It's one of the key points in the Maliki school of thought. And that is Amal Ahl al-Medina. And that is the actions and the way of the people of Medina. Because the people of Medina, this is where some of the greatest scholars were actually living. So Imam az-Zuhri is directly involved in this chain of understanding. And so this reputation that Imam az-Zuhri had, it reached Umar ibn AbdulAziz. Okay, he was first one of his students in his class, and he was affected by him, and then he grew up, and suddenly he has power now. But he realizes that Imam az-Zuhri is not just a teacher who gives you book knowledge, but he's a teacher who can guide you And this is the heavy point. Okay, so this is where he recognizes scholarship, piety, and the commitment to preserve Islamic knowledge. So now you have a leader who's righteous. That's one of the points. So Umar ibn AbdulAziz was a pious person. He was a good person. He wanted to do what's right. But he wasn't necessarily a mujtahid, high scholar. And so he invited Imam Zuhri to be part of his administration. So he was no longer just a sheikh in the masjid. Okay, he was part of the administration. It's like many of the masjids today, the imam is leading salat, but he's not on the executive committee, right? He's not on the board of directors that have the authority. See, if they really had sense, they would have the imams on the executive committee with the board of directors. See, that's when the power and the knowledge starts to come together naturally, because it's not infused in one person. So this is your second form now. This is the second form of this relationship. And so, what happened because of this relationship? Very instrumental in Islamic history. What happened out of this? Number one, the Quran itself, you remember, was endangered because people were trying to make up Qurans. And they were doing, things like this. I remember, even in our times, this is still happening up until today. I was a student in Medina, and I'll never forget, one time I was sitting in the Prophet's mosque, and somebody shouted in the mosque. And so everybody turned around and looked, and he shouted, and people ran over to him, and he said, "Look at this Quran." And he said he found this Quran that was coming out of Jordan, that it had erased all of the negative things about Bani Israel. So anything to do with the Yahud that was negative, the verse was erased from the Quran. And so this brother is reading the Quran, and he realizes, wait, the verse is gone. So they reported it to the authorities, and they had to collect all of those Qur'ans from the Prophet's mosque and anywhere, because they were coming out of Amman, Jordan. So they had to collect all of these Qur'ans and burn them. What about back in these days, when the Qur'an was just now put together in a book form? It was there in people's minds, but it was just now being put together and consolidated. Okay, now, how do you interpret the Qur'an? The hadith gives us the sunnah. The hadith gives us the meat. Okay, Allah tells us, aqim as-salat. But how do you pray? The Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Right? Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you have seen me pray. How did he pray? You get it from the hadith. Okay? So, if somebody comes along and says, I heard that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to pray like this, sitting in a chair, and pray into the sun when the sun rose in the middle, and he said, that's an authentic hadith, we have a problem here. How are you going to stop it? Maybe he was a great leader before Islam came, but the hadith is false. So therefore, there needed to be a way to preserve the hadiths, to compile them and to preserve them, so that all of the major areas within Islamic life, that we would have authentic traditions to go back to. They didn't have hadith books like us. You couldn't pick up Bukhari and Muslim. There was nothing like this. There was only the Quran that was there. People had memorized it. And then there was the traditions that people had memorized, but they were all over the place. So how do you now study this? How do you put it together? So Umar ibn AbdulAziz then instructed Imam al-Zuhri. He counseled with him, and he said, you take the lead. See, so this is the ruler now who has power and authority. And he says, I'll give you the resources. So Imam al-Zuhri then began to systematically gather, verify, document the hadith, right? He laid the foundation for hadith collection, the science of hadith. Imam az-Zuhri is a fundamental person in this. How does it come about? His relationship with the ruler. Okay? Next, in the area of governance, okay, that az-Zuhri, he counseled Umar to be ethical, that you should have rules. You can't be, it's not based on power. Okay? And so he gave him guidance on how to rule in a moral way, how to implement justice. And so this was crucial in showing Islamic values through the rule itself. So Umar then consulted him on fiscal matters, that's financial matters, okay, such as how to distribute wealth in a fair way, right? How to deal with non-Muslims, okay? And how does Sharia, how do you respect Sharia? How do you deal with the welfare of all your subjects? This is now implementing Islam. So Imam az-Zuhri then, he gives this advice, to the Khalifa. Another area which is notable is the area of justice. And this is a deep area, and Imam az-Zuhri, he made it clear that wealth is a key thing. If you go back to the Prophet ﷺ, you see that when gold came into Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to give it all away. And when it was all given away, then he would go to sleep. So he did not keep the wealth for himself. And you'll see the same with the great leaders. You'll all see them the same. And so Imam az-Zuhri was strict on this with the Khalifa Umar ibn AbdulAziz, that you have to deal with the public. Don't amass wealth yourself. This is crucial. And so this now was a serious thing because Umar then also applied this to the ruling family. So the Umayyads themselves, who were used to being the rulers and used to living in palaces and used to having all the wealth and all of the power and everything themselves, they now had to follow the strict rules of zakat. And in this relationship, and this now sets the pace really for the future, for what is your example of a good ruler and a good scholar cooperating together? What is it based on? Umar, he showed respect and he made it clear to Zuhri, you are an independent scholar. You're not my lapdog. You're not the scholar of the Sultan. Okay? So I'm not going to exert pressure upon you for certain policies and certain decisions. You make your decisions based upon the Book of Allah and based upon the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So with this independence, Imam az-Zuhri was able to be a true advisor, right, to give honest feedback, right, and this really helped in terms of governance, that the scholar is free to criticize the ruler. You see, look at our countries today, right? Watch our countries. If somebody criticizes the king, criticizes the ruling family, he's in jail. And this happens, unfortunately, all over the so-called Muslim world. Okay? That's not the basis of the relationship of the ruler to the rulers. So Umar then, wanted some specific things. Okay? Give me some specific advice. And so the Imam told him, you are appointed over a people who will have claims upon you on the day of judgment. Okay? They will take from you on the day of judgment. And this affected, Umar ibn Abdulaziz so much that, he wouldn't even take anything from himself from the Baytul Mal, from the public treasury. Okay? He would not take anything. He became really strict upon himself. And they together promoted knowledge. So they financed madrasas, they financed scholarship, for people to learn, and then for knowledge to be spread. So, and whenever you have a government that is like this, where the government is actually putting its wealth into knowledge, then the society flourishes. The unfortunate thing today is that many of our governments, if you look at their fiscal records, you'll see that they're mostly putting their wealth into the military. And secondly, after that, it's in building their palaces, or buying big yachts, or buying worthless paintings, and just throwing their money away. Okay? That's because they don't have the relationship with the scholars who are independent enough to criticize them. And so Imam al-Zuhri advised the Khalifa Umar, avoid favoritism, right? Nepotism, in other words, selecting your own family members, right? People should be put into the position based on merit. It's a meritocracy. The one who's the most suitable to take the position, who's most qualified, that is the person who should be in the position. So what came out of this? Right? It was justice, there was governance, and in that 3-year period, approximately, the whole Muslim world changed. It's like light coming into a room filled with darkness, or with just a little bit of light. Suddenly a bright light is there because of this relationship. Also, because of this hadith compilation, because of the money that was put into it, because of Zuhri had the right to do this, and he was connected to the great scholars of hadith in Medina, he set the pace, right, for scholars like Imam Malik. So Imam Malik, his hadith book Al-Muwatta is the first authentic book of hadith. He's affected by Imam al-Zuhri, right? Because Imam al-Zuhri now is setting the pace. How do you codify? How do you bring the hadith together? How do you tell weak from strong? Okay, so he sets the pace for this. Imam Malik brings the Muwatta, and then Imam Ahmed comes along and he brings the Musnad of Imam Ahmed, which is the largest book of hadith in Islamic history. They're influenced by Imam al-Zuhri. Also, Bukhari and Muslim. The very Bukhari and Muslim, the systems that we see, is affected by Imam al-Zuhri because of his relationship with the ruler. And so this is our model. It's the model of the positive cooperation between the scholars and the rulers. And that, in a sense, is a great revival in righteous leadership. That is the way that we want, leadership to be. We want it to be, so you will see in the principles, you see that the leader, you see that the scholars, that they are working together, and the Islamic society is able to function. And if we are to come out of the confusion that is in the Muslim world today, that this is a model, not just to have a leader who has the knowledge, but also to have knowledge, to have leaders who are pious enough, and sensitive enough to bring scholars around them and to give these scholars, that independence that they need to be true Islamic scholars. That is another form for us in the relationship of minarets to the thrones. So I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have concerning this second model.
Okay, there's a couple of questions online. Assalamu alaikum. What timeline when the Shia became prominent was during the Fatimid dynasty? What was the timeline?
The discussion about the Shia, of course, is a long one. And you have to recognize that in the time of Ali, the word Shia meant Shia to Ali and Shia to Muawiyah. So Shia only means a group. Okay? But then when Muawiyah took over, the Umayyads became the leaders. And people from the family of Ali, like Al-Hussein, opposed them. But at that time, everybody was praying the same, everybody was fasting the same. There's no Shia group and Sunni group. Nobody used these words. It is only later, after that. It's after the time of Al-Hussein. It's now going into the Tabi'in, that in the area of Kufa, in Iraq, that you get people who now start to bring in different concepts, ideas of the imamate, that the imams are like prophets. The Quran is not complete. Things like this, Surah Al-Wilaya, that there's an extra chapter that we don't even have. Things like that started to come in, especially in the area of Kufa, because this was always a hotbed of political confusion. So this is when you start to have the Shia group, not just political, but it becomes like a religious type of group. Okay, so it's around the time of the Tabi'in there, where it starts to come in. Okay, question? Another question?
Given that the time period of the Umayyad dynasty was 7th, 8th century,
Yeah.
was Muslim rule, despite the internal turmoil, more just and fair than the nearby Byzantines and Persians?
Yes, I mean, the Islamic rule, again, as I said, there is authority. I mean, there's too much power and force being used to rule instead of piety. Okay, however, people were still basically Muslims. The food all in your marketplaces, everything is halal. There's no pigs running around. Okay, zakat is there. People are making hajj. Islam is spreading. So it's another world. It's nothing like the Romans. It's nothing like the other societies. But politically, it was not the Khilafat. And this is where some confusion comes in sometimes when the leaders get too greedy and power struggles happen. But still, it was far cry from what was happening in Byzantium. And the example of that is in the case of the Abbasids. Now, the Abbasids came after the Umayyads. Okay, so one of the rulers, Al-Mu'tasim Billah, he, and this is now going another, few hundred years later. Okay, so a Muslim woman was captured, taken prisoner in the Christian lands. And she cried, Wa Mu'tasima. She cried to him. And the word somehow got back to the Khalifa that one Muslim woman was captured by the Christians. So he wrote to the Christian ruler and he said, if you don't release this Muslim woman, I will send an army to you that is so big that the front of it will be to you and the back still coming from me. And the Christian leader said, hear and obey. And he sent back the Muslim woman into Muslim lands with female bodyguards. Look at this. Look at the izzah of Islam. Look at what's happening today in Palestine. Look at what's going on in Kashmir. What's happening in the Sudan, other places. Look what's going on. And go back into, different points in history. They still had izzah. They had strength. And they had respect. But on the top, there was political corruption. So we want to see the bright lights that happen even within these time periods. And those are the same bright lights that can go back on today if we implement the example of these, pious people. Okay, question? Floor is open for any other questions.
Assalamu alaikum. Are there any books translated in English on the biography of Umar bin Abdulaziz?
There are some, yes, if I don't have the specific name, but I mean, if you look at, there's a few history reference books. I'll have this thing for you there. The History of Islam by Mas'ud al-Hassan, right? There's another book called A Short History of Islam by al-Jazairi, S.C. al-Jazairi. Okay? The Golden Age and Decline of Islamic Civilization, Jazairi. Right? So these are a few, of course there's Tariq Tabari, and that's in Arabic, the history of I think it's translated into English. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Bidayah wa Nihaya is translated into English. Ibn Kathir. Okay? So there are some books where you can get AbdulAziz, Umar ibn AbdulAziz. So Isa will,
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
so inshallah we will be,
Allahu
okay, we'll let the adhan go off first.
Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
There was another question? Okay, so we'll be closing the class, and next week we're going to look at something a little bit different. So we're going to see when the scholars now they confront the ruler. Now you're going to see something a little bit different, with a negative relationship, and then what happens in that. So we can see all sides and examples of everything. Okay. So have a safe journey home for those who are online. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.